Hello! Today we are talking about whether people actually have a romantic type and also what the hell that would actually even mean in terms of our relationships with people. Also, I'm Katie if you're new, by the way. Please go subscribe to my channel if you haven't done that yet. Anyway, I love this topic so much and I literally got to do a seminar on this exact topic in class the other week and it was so fun and I love to recycle, which is why we're here today. To start with, what do people mean when they talk about having a type? Essentially, I would say a type is whatever combination of physical and personality traits someone finds particularly attractive in a potential romantic partner. I always think it's so fun to ask people to describe their type and see if they start by talking about physical stuff like hair color or height, or whether they go for personality traits like sense of humor or loyalty. And then obviously you're always gonna have people who are like, oh, I don't really have a type, I just kind of like whoever I like. I just feel like the way people answer this question probably says something about them. I know I definitely have a type, I just don't really know how to explain it. It's kind of like when people are pretty and also slightly off-putting. Please go and tell me your type in the comments because I want to hear about it. There has been so much research done looking at whether or not people actually do have a type and the effect that it has. Usually in the research they use this concept called ideal standards. Basically it's just the academic word for having a type. It's kind of based in evolutionary theory and it basically focuses on traits that we think would make a good partner and a good parent to the children that evolutionary theory is convinced every single person on earth wants to have. And the thing about these ideal standards is they are generally pretty automatic. You don't have to really think about them. We're just using them to evaluate whether or not we find people attractive and just making these snap judgments about it. So a lot of studies have found that heaps of people do tend to end up in relationships with people who have similar traits. And it's particularly common with things like hair color and eye color. And also that these things are different for each individual person. So from my point of view, the conclusion there is that a lot of people do seem to have a type. But we want to know why and also how. There are a bunch of theories about where our type might develop from. The first one is super unfortunate and Freudian and it's basically just that we're attracted to traits that our parents have, which might stem from them being like our primary attachment figure in childhood. So then when we grow up and the person we're dating generally becomes our primary attachment figure, we sort of look for the traits that we found this comfort in growing up. This is so unfortunate, but the way our parents treat us and the way we treat our partners is scarily similar. And there is this absolutely horrifying chart that I've seen that does like a side-by-side comparison of all of these similarities. And I think that once you see it, you can never really unsee it. So I'm not going to show it to you now unless you ask me to, in which case I will show it to you. But fortunately, there are other ideas about where our type might come from. And one of these is that we want to date ourselves so bad. Our type often includes traits that we have. And partially this is just a whole bit about the fact that as people, we kind of want to like ourselves. And in order to do this, our brain has to view the traits that we have and the things about us as likable. And if we're viewing these things as likable, obviously we're gonna like them in other people as well. I hope I've explained that in a way that makes sense. But also this takes a lot of the heat off the whole parents thing, I think, because so many of our traits are inherited genetically. So while they might technically be traits that our parents do have, that might not be the reason we are attracted to the traits. It could just be more of a narcissism thing, which I think is preferable. I think that the theory that we want to date ourselves has the most evidence supporting it, and maybe one day science will get to the point where we can just clone ourselves and date ourselves. But would anyone actually want to do that? Would you want to do that? I personally couldn't think of anything worse than dating myself. But that might just be because I have a super undateable personality. There's obviously other ideas as well, like the whole opposites attract thing where we're looking for traits that balance out our own. This one's super based in like evolutionary theory where we want to give our kids the traits that we don't have in ourselves. But there's actually not much evidence at all that opposites attract. I think it's just like this pop culture thing that people started saying because it sounds nice. It would be fun if it was true. And there's also obviously this idea that our past partners play a role in shaping our type, which definitely makes sense when you think about the effect that a bad or a good relationship can have on how you view people. So if they suck super bad, we'd adjust our type to exclude some of the traits that they have. And then if we had a really good experience, we might adjust our type to include the traits that they do have. And then the last theory is essentially just that our type is socially constructed. We literally just make that shit up based on what everyone tells us we should be finding attractive. Also, there's a smaller scale of like our immediate friends and family and what they find attractive and how that might be playing a role, because if that's what you're always hearing about, it makes sense for you to kind of internalize that. Plus I think most people probably want to date someone who gets along with their friends, so your type would need to include personality traits that your friends also like. Well, okay, I feel like I just covered so much right then. But now let's talk about when and why we don't end up in relationships with people who are our type. And this stuff is so fun to me. Like, this literally is so cool to me. This stuff is so fun and so exciting, and I find it just very, very cool because the research research here basically says that we are all idiots who don't know ourselves. We don't know what we like, we don't know what we want, we don't know anything about anything at all. So what the studies show is that basically before we meet someone, our type is the main thing that we use to decide whether or not we find them attractive and would want to date them, which is that whole automatic snap judgment kind of process going on. So this is happening in situations like on dating apps or seeing random people in crowded bars. Basically situations where you really have nothing to go off except for the most shallow possible information about this person. But once you've actually met people and had a conversation with them, people's type generally doesn't matter, like at all. So they usually test this using like speed dating events, which, God, how fun would that be to do an experiment where you just make people go on speed dates. I think that would be the most fun kind of experiment to conduct. So basically they make people go on these speed dates, and then at the end they asked who from all the speed dates they liked. And this is my favorite part of all of relationship science, I think, is that we have absolutely not one single way of predicting who is gonna like who. We just have absolutely no idea. Their ideal type that they've described isn't gonna predict who they like. Their own personality traits won't predict who they're gonna like at the speed dates. As far as we know, it is literally all just vibes, which is so cool to me. And I know it's meant to be like annoying in research when you ask a question and there's no answer and you don't know what's going on and like you can't predict something, but I just think it's cool. That attraction is just this weird mess. I'm honestly obsessed with the fact that you cannot predict attraction. Also, I feel like it's kind of reassuring to me personally as a redhead, because whenever people describe their types, no one ever says, yeah, I like redheads. It's always blondes or brunettes. So the fact that there is hope that maybe one day someone will love me is kind of beautiful. So yes, to conclude my overexcited speech on attraction, essentially we do have a type, yeah, but once we actually meet people, it doesn't really matter very much. And I think the basic theory for why this happens is that our ideal type is very much this hypothetical kind of thing. So it makes sense for when you are judging people that you don't actually know, like in a hypothetical sense. But then once you actually talk to these people, they're obviously not hypothetical anymore. You can't sort of superimpose your own ideas of them onto them once you actually know them. At this point, we don't have to make those automatic snap judgments because you can contextualize them as people and make these kind of slower assessments and evaluations of how they make you feel and the traits that they have and the things that they say and the things that they do. Alright, the last thing that I'm going to talk about in this video, because I feel like it's getting kind of long, and also my battery's about to die, so if I'm talking a bit faster than usual, that's why. Also, if I'm talking about faster than usual, it also is because I'm very excited about all of this stuff. Like, I just love it. I really, truly love this stuff. Anyway, the last thing for today is what happens when you're actually in a relationship with someone who is or isn't your type. Because there are very, very different outcomes depending on whether they are this ideal standard that you have. So if the person that you're dating is your type, you tend to have higher relationship satisfaction, which I guess just seems like it makes a lot of sense. Like, that doesn't really feel like it needs a huge amount of explanation. If you're with someone who has all of the traits that you believe you're attracted to, obviously you're probably going to be happier with them and maybe find them more attractive. But if this person is not your type, you have lower relationship satisfaction. And a lot of the time what ends up happening here is people try to change their partners to squish them into the box that is their type. And does this work? Do their partners change? Usually no. And then what happens is that the partner gets upset and hurt because you're trying to change them, and that's kind of fucking mean. And then you're also even more upset because your partner isn't changing when you want them to so badly, and now you're thinking about how much they're not your type and how much they're not changing to be your type, and it's all very unsatisfying for you and unsatisfying for them, and everyone is just unhappy, which is just so cool, don't you think? God, I love this so much. There is something so wrong with people. Anyway, the point of this video is that yes, people do kind of have a type, and yes, we do kind of use it to evaluate whether we want to date people or not. But once you actually meet people and have conversations with them, it just doesn't really matter so much. Which I think is so exciting when you think about how dating apps essentially mean that we aren't meeting people anymore unless we've already decided that we like them. Basically, we're immediately ruling out anyone who isn't our type, so we don't actually get that whole bit of meeting someone and then it not even mattering. So I do kind of wonder what's going to be happening in terms of relationship outcomes now that dating apps are like one of the most common ways of meeting your partner. I will find out someday, by the way, and I'll get back to you. Anyway, that's all. Sorry for how excited I was in this video. It'll probably happen again. At least just be grateful you didn't have to listen to the full seminar, which included more graphs. Okay, I am going to shut up now. But just by the way, my type is people who don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Okay.